Wagwan Two Tone Podcast.
Give me a second to authorize the purchase of ramen. I'll be
All
right.
right, cool.
All right, sorry, that was really important.
All
You
right.
gotta know what you're gonna
So
eat, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a super legit ramen place like 9 minutes from here, and we've kind of overdone it because that's like our go-to comfort food for everything. It's like ramen, ramen. So
we're here with Matt Henson from the Oi band Noise. Welcome.
thank you very much for having me.
You're from Tacoma, Washington.
Yes, Tacoma, Washington. Originally I'm from Georgia, but spent more time in Tacoma than any other place I've ever lived, and obviously, that's where the band was born. That's where my kids were born. So Tacoma, it is.
I see a Fred Perry shirt that you're wearing. Oi music.
Yeah, Oi Street Punk. The whole title Noise. It's funny. I've been asked a lot, like where we came up with that name, and initially bouncing names off of each other. We decided we wanted to have Oi in the title of the band, just as like a tongue in cheek. They figured nobody's gonna listen to it anyway, so let's just name it whatever. And then it kind of grew legs. That became the name. It was kind of too late to change it, so Noise it was, and it sticks. Yeah, we're definitely an Oi Street Punk influenced band. When I write songs, I don't really abide by any sort of rules or parameters. I write what I think sounds good, and then we expand upon that as musicians. And as we've kind of grown as musicians, our sound has too. It's pissed some people off. It's brought some people closer to us, and we're good with all of that.
Because you're a poet, dude. Like,
Thanks, man. Coming from you, that means a hell of a lot. I'll just
nah,
on record, I'm a
dude.
huge fan.
Thank you. Yeah, you're a poet. I remember when the first time I heard your music, I was like, "Who's this guy? I gotta sign him." I was like, "I gotta sign this dude. This dude is amazing. Come on, man. You need management? I'm gonna manage you because you was just that good, man."
Matt, how'd you hear about Cooley? Were you a Pilfers fan?
I am a Pilfer. I'm a huge Pilfers fan. The first time I heard Pilfers was in my. I had a Dodge Neon at the time, so pretty classy. It was a Fearless Records compilation, and I heard "Show No Fear." That was the first song I ever. I think ska, all music is kind of it's easy to make, but it's hard to make well. Ska and hardcore are two genres specifically where that is very much the case. And the Pilfers, the way that they implemented different subgenres into what it was that they were doing just really resonated with me. And it's just super catchy. So I think there's all these different boxes that you check musically if you want to expand the resonance that you have with the art to more people. And that's not necessarily the goal, right? But I think the more you incorporate things, the easier it is to kind of get kind of muddled and not necessarily get across what it is that you're trying to get through. But if you do it well, it's something extremely special. And I feel like the Pilfers, when I first heard the Pilfers, I figured it was like standard ska. There's 47 people in the band, and they got somebody on triangle. They got, the dancer for the triangle. But finding out it was just a few people making that music was just, it was great for me.
How long have you been to ska, Oi, or punk music?
30 years. I went to my first show when I was oh, Jesus. I'm older than I thought. So about 30, 32 years. I went to my first show when I was 14. Everybody can do the math in the background. My first show was Bad Religion in Atlanta at the Masquerade. I had friends that were into punk, introducing me to bands. Minor Threat was the first band I ever listened to. And it was just such a departure from everything that I had grown up listening to, but it got me. The first show that I went to, I was hooked. Just the intimacy, community, the communal acknowledgement of the art form, and it being in this receptive mode where everybody is kind of this conglomerate, kind of receiving the art and participating to make it what it was. Just I'd never seen anything like that before, and I loved it. I was hooked. Very very long time. Not as long as some people, but I knew right there that I kind of always wanted to be a musician, and I wouldn't really call myself that right now, but I knew that I wanted to make music, and I think punk was kind of my avenue into that becoming in the realm of possibility for me to do. Like I can get up on stage and make some music and maybe resonate with a few people. It was a really long time until I actually did that, but that first show was when I really became cognizant that there was an art form that was almost like specifically designed almost, internally to really get me where I wanted to be artistically.
You switched over from being just a bass player to be a vocalist and a songwriter. When did that happen?
Originally, when we started the band, Nate Leinfelder, Noise was his band. He started it. I was asked to play. I was in an Oi band out of Olympia, Washington, that he got into, and I was the lead singer for that band and bass player. He asked me to join as a bass player, and then as we started kind of progressing, I had some songs that I had written for my previous band, and we thought it would be a really cool dynamic to have dual vocals. Wrote and recorded 4 songs. Is an 7-inch called "Walk Beside Us." It was 2 of Nate's songs, 2 of my songs. And as we progressed, I just got super inspired and just started writing songs constantly. My songwriting process is ultimately I'll start humming something, and that will either become the bass, the guitar, the vocal progression. And then once I have the time to get to a guitar and start kind of running through it, I'll add the bells and whistles. And Noise was just a positive experience for me. It was almost the antithesis of my previous band. Everybody fed off of each other. And so you
Mm.
have this thing in your mind, and then you bring it to the table and it grows legs and becomes something completely different. Came more and more involved in the songwriting process. It just kind of took off from there. We created a dynamic where if you bring a song to the table, my criteria for that was if it stuck in my head, if it was something that I just couldn't get out of my head, I
Mhm.
figured it had enough kind of umph to get it to the point where we could potentially record it. And fortunately, the case more often than not.
Mm.
Um, Being in the Army kind of made things a little difficult at
Yeah,
times. We were always
I was wondering about that.
fighting
How did you
time.
go from how did you keep the band alive and still be in the military?
Very carefully. Now, so my big thing is family, band, and job. Of time management that it took to do everything without dropping a ball. I mean, it kind of resigned myself to the fact that like if I was ever going to drop a ball, it would be musically. If I ever had to cut something, it would be music because the other two simply the way that we did it was if I knew that I had training or deployment or whatever coming up, I would take everything that I had written, and we were fortunate enough to where uh, our second guitar player was our sound engineer, recording engineer. So he had a studio in his basement. Could record practice. If I had a new song, we could record it. The guys could work on it while I was out doing, climbing trees and climbing dirt and all the army stuff. And then when I came back, we had something that was a little bit more concrete, and then we could lay it. That is really the linchpin to our whatever degree of success. I mean, you could argue that we've been fortunate enough to experience. It was all predicated on the fact that we had a sound engineer in the band, and we had access to a studio anytime we wanted to.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
if
that's a
I had a
good.
few hours, I would go and lay bass, and sometimes I would lay guitar and vocals. The foundation was drums. So if we could get Kenny in the studio to record drums, we had the foundation, and then Jesse and I could go in and record whenever. Nate, when he had the ability to, could come in and record his vocals. It just a lot of time management and even more luck, I think, is how we were able to keep it going for so long.
How did you feel emotionally coming from is still talking about the military because I'm kind of fascinated your mindset from leaving. I don't know if you was deployed in a war zone or having that experience and then coming in to do music. Is
Uh,
that a release? Is that just
Absolutely.
party time? What is
Um,
it?
I wrote Rising Tide in Afghanistan. I wrote half The Scars We Hide. I wrote half of that record while I was deployed. Music's always been, I mean, it's just widely established that music is an excellent vehicle for emotional expression and getting people through things. And our band's no different. Music that I write, I think, says one thing, or it's one thing that I'm trying to express, and then
Mm.
the lyrics are something else. And a lot of times, what I'll do is I'll take a melody or a chord progression that is upbeat and just a little bit less somber, and then I'll take some really somber lyrics or a very serious topic and I'll lay that on top of that. Rising Tide, Scars We Hide, The Real Enemy especially, all were written from kind of the perspective of somebody with a, unique, I guess, take on things. And there's nothing but kind of what you just said, the fact that I was a soldier, but I also was very heavily in the punk rock scene. I think objectively, people with no knowledge of the military would look at that and say that it's very odd. I would argue that it's not. I would say that you don't really get much more working class than United States soldier. Everybody has their opinion about why people join the Army and what it is that they think that they're doing in doing so. I can tell you definitively, the Army is the most socioeconomically diverse organization on the planet. Everybody comes to that place from a different experience and a different perspective and a different dynamic. It's an incredible place to draw on other people's experiences and really get a very objective understanding of what it is, what's going on in other people's lives and what's going on in the world. Put on top of that the fact that you are being separated from your family and your loved ones for long periods of time. It makes for a great backdrop for music, and that's kind of what I used it for. Not just to make the lyrics and the music more relevant, but also just to get me through it. It was my experience. So to answer your question, ultimately is very, very seamless transfer between being deployed, coming home, recording, and Rising Tide was recorded. That record was recorded when I had just come back from Afghanistan, and our guitar player at the time, Justin, who is back in the band now, he was deploying to Afghanistan. So we had a very small window where we were able, that's the reason the record is only 7 songs, and 2 of them were previously recorded. We re-recorded them because the band had kind of progressed to a point where the songs we were playing live were different than the songs that had originally been recorded. So it's only 7 songs because we didn't have time to record anything else. Justin deployed to Afghanistan, I think maybe 3 months after I got home. So it was very quick, learning them and getting them recorded. Different walks of life and all different types of people serve in the military. And especially when you look at like the Vietnam era, you didn't have a choice. I was actually just looking at my dad's draft notice. He didn't want to be in the Army. Department of Defense decided it'd be a really good idea for him to kind of join up. When you take that at kind of face value, obviously there wasn't a choice back then. There's a choice now. It's an all volunteer force. But again, people come to the conclusion that that is what they need to do in the moment for all different types of reasons. And they stay for all different types of reasons. I stayed because I like to take care of people and I like to take care of soldiers. So that's why I decided to do it for as long as I did.
Oh, I thought you
But I
went there
feel
for
like
the ramen noodles.
and the ramen noodles, yeah, and the MREs. Took care of my family. It was always interesting when like soldiers would find out that I was in a punk band, especially my soldiers who I'm, in charge of. Especially when they show up to a noise show and I didn't even know they knew I was in a band. So now I got to worry about them getting in trouble while I'm trying to worry about playing a show. I always tried to keep the two things as separate as I possibly could. I was very selective with like who I would let know that I was in a band. A lot of times I tried to be anyway. In my capacity as a leader, I wanted to be known as a leader. While I think that being in a band kind of try to keep it separate is so trying to explain the punk rock scene to someone who is completely unfamiliar with it while doing so in the capacity of a leader or a teammate, it's hard and it takes a while, right? And a lot of times you don't have the time to invest in, well, before you go to one of our shows and you see all these, people that are going to look different than what you're used to. It's not a fucking Taylor Swift show, so it's a little different. There's going to be elbows and fists flying. So those 3 kids, when they came to my show, the first thing I said after I said, "What the fuck are you doing here?" I said, "Who's driving?" They're drinking alcohol. Don't get in the pit at all. You're going to see people doing stuff. Stay away from it. I didn't want them, catching an elbow or catching a foot and then coming to, work on Monday with a black eye. And then, well, I was at First Sergeant's punk rock show and I got beat up. Because context is everything, right? And so that at face value is going to get me in trouble. And it's just not something that I want to deal with. Lyrically, I really didn't want to have the discussion with, again, being selective with people who I share. And still to this day with my job, I'm selective with who I talk to about, my band, even though, there's a degree of attendance at shows, and there's a number of people who stream us on Spotify and know who we are, and we're super thankful for that. It's still our art, and it's still very personal. I'm going to have a very detailed, in-depth discussion with somebody about something that I have created. It may make me sound like an asshole, but I want to be kind of selective with the audience, because I want to make sure that the person's going to be receptive and at least take it for what it is that I'm trying to convey, vices their image of what punk rock is. Which, holy shit, some of the bands that have come up in the, oh, you're punk, you mean like Stained? No, I don't mean that at all. Um, so it's punk rock, like Disturbed. I'm saying it's just like, I don't really
Mm.
have the time to bring you through the entire history of punk rock and then also my inclusion in it. But more to the point, my job is really to take care, or it was to take care of soldiers. And while I think being a musician, if you want to call it that, or having these extracurricular things that I do make me more personable, right? It humanizes me to a degree. Specific scene that I'm associated with, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Stigma that I think gets tied to it in a lot of instances. And a lot of times it's just not worth the conversation, to where I have to defend punk rock to some, kid that's just no reason to have that conversation at all. It's, hindering my abilities to do what I'm getting paid to do, kind of.
So you've made the transition now back home. You're working in a new field, or something that you've worked in before.
Somewhat related, counter weapons of mass destruction advisor. Countries or places that are susceptible to any sort of like chemical weapon or nuclear weapon attack or material. My job is kind of to keeping them as safe as they can possibly be kept.
Beautiful. And you still
I,
manage to do music again.
Yeah.
I like the show don't tell, how it's almost like explaining what punk rock is. Action. Show don't tell. This is, you got to figure it out yourself. Like I can't explain what it is, and it's almost like guilty by association. I see you have ties to like the Street Dogs, correct?
Yeah, we did a split with the Street Dogs.
And you did a video with Al, right? Al Bar.
We did. That was really just surreal for me. I mean, being a Dropkick Murphys fan for as long as I was, I will never forget. I was at lunch with my wife, and I had commented on a Dropkick Murphys post on Instagram, just like, hey, I'm in a punk band in Tacoma called Noise. If you guys ever need an opening act, the standard, notice me, senpai. And they responded with, we love Noise. We'd love to play with you guys. And absolutely, absolutely blew my mind. I remember specifically because I stopped paying attention to anything that my wife was saying, uh, to my detriment. But I was explaining to her, like, look, Dropkick Murphys know, just the fact that they had any idea who we were. That is a feeling that just, it does not ever get old. Cooley having any idea who I was, or like liking my music, that
Loving, loving.
that is, so when we talk about other people knowing that you're in a band or whatever, like there's plenty of coworkers that I've had that have found out that I'm in a band that take it upon themselves that, I really need to tell this guy that it's not really my thing. Didn't solicit an opinion from you regarding my band. Like it is actually possible to dislike something and not tell somebody. But I mean, that's fine. It's not for everybody. Kind of quantifies my abilities as a writer is when somebody whose music has really gotten me through some hard things says that was good, like your music's good. It's just an immense source of validation, and it's never going to get old for me. Al reached out. He said he doesn't like to do email very much, so what's your phone number? And I gave him my phone number, and I'll never forget it. I was at work, got a call from a number I didn't recognize, answered it, and the voice said, "Is Matt Henson there?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is he." And he went, "Hey man, it's Al Bar." And I talked to him for probably an hour and a half. Being able to reach out to Al, to Rob Aston, to Gordy from Forgotten, and Lars Frederiksen and the Bastards. Having Lars listen to our record, and he helped produce Scars We Hide. I mean, Lars Frederiksen helped out with that. Just mind-boggling. But like Al agreeing to do vocals on that song, that song specifically, that I have the ability to effectively articulate how it feels, right? Just because the music has been such a big part of my life, and getting to make my own and incorporate people whose music has directly impacted both my writing and my life. People have different relationships with music, but mine is just so, most of my friends are the exact same way. And getting messages from people who say that our music has helped them through hard times, it's just, it's amazing. It's such a huge, I want to say responsibility because it's the wrong word,
It
but
is.
like, it really does make you cognizant that people are listening. And your message needs to be crafted very, I think, meticulously, and you need to be very careful, necessarily dancing around people's feelings, but making sure that the product that you are supplying and what you are giving people is done the way that you want it to be conveyed as much as you can control. Because stuff's always going to be taken out of context. But like,
Yeah.
I think Ian MacKaye said something in a documentary. He said, take it seriously. So don't just be satisfied with just some shit. And that was way before noise started that I saw. It was American hardcore. But I remember listening to that. I was like, man, if I ever be in a position where I can record music, I'm gonna adhere to that as much as I can. I certainly didn't with my first band, but with noise, we've really tried to do that. We head to Philadelphia
Hmm.
on uh, Saturdays when we're coming up. We're playing. It is a benefit for an initiative called Code Blue, which is basically for people without homes in Philadelphia. When the temperature falls below freezing, they actually open their doors and they let homeless persons come in and spend the night.
Oh
So
wow.
we're coming in. It's going to be a very Oi laden bill. A lot of Oi bands, a lot of really good Oi bands, for that matter. And then we head to New York City the following day. The New York Hardcore Chronicles, their series of shows. So I mean, super excited about that. A friend of mine, George Alexander, who started basically a group called Street Loyal Recovery Group, and it's for sober curious and people in recovery, that also is putting on so it's basically a production kind of all encompassing initiative that he's created, which is, it's amazing. But you know, anytime George asks us to do something, if we can say yes, we will. So that
Excellent.
we're absolutely honored to play it. Play raises some money for a really good cause.
What other punk and oi bands are your favorites that you listen to?
Besides Stained and Disturbed, Bad Nerves is right now my favorite band. Drug Church is another band. It's more like a post-hardcore band, but like Drug Church and Bad Nerves have like encompassed my playlist for the last probably year. Coxbar is another huge influence on me. Dropkick Murphys, mostly the earlier stuff. Do or Die was probably one of the quintessentially influenced musically. Blitz is one of my favorite bands of all time. Old New York hardcore, huge fan. So yeah, Agnostic Front, Murphy's Law, Madball, but I'm also a huge Kill Your Idols fan. Um,
Oh
Snapcase.
wow, Long Island.
Yeah, Kill Your Idols is one of my all-time favorite bands. And their bass player Mike is a friend of mine. Hopefully, he'll be at the show. He was there the last time we played New York. It's almost like asking somebody, like, so many bands. I get tongue tied. So typically, I'll revert to the older bands that I always love. I'm also really big into hardcore. I'm really big into reggae and ska. I'm really big into drum and bass.
Mm.
My friend Choke from Slapshot, he and I will trade drum and bass stuff a lot. I'm a huge hip hop head, old head. My son listens to what is classified as hip hop now. And uh, I hate the dynamic of saying these kids today, they don't listen to the I cannot stand that. And then my son's like, Dad, I want to play this. I'm like, okay, let's go. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, you're not going to be a boomer. You're not going to be a boomer. You're not going to be a boomer. And then he plays it, and it's just, I was like, be positive, like, because
There you go.
I don't want to dissuade my son from coming to me with music, because I think that's a very special thing. So I
Yeah.
was like, well, the beat is really good. Um, let's, you know, who's got
Yeah,
kind of a similar beat is
yeah.
this group called Grave Diggers, and it's RZA
Oh
from
yeah.
Wu Tang. And let me play that, and it's kind of like horror rap. And then I kind of grabbed him with that, and he was like, "Okay, this is cool." And he listened to it for like 30 seconds, and he put his headphones on. It's a huge win for me. 30 seconds, my kid. That's
That's how I
like,
got my son. That's exactly how I got him. A little bit of this. Oh, wait, that's kind of cool. But have you heard this?
yep, yep. I got him into Tribe Called Quest for a little bit,
Mm,
and that was just because Tribe Called Quest is my all time favorite hip hop group. I got him to listen to a little bit of it, and I overplayed my hand, which I think some dads do, because he was nodding his head and he was getting into it. And I was like, when Tribe Called Quest used to play places, Fife Dog, who's got the more gruff voice, he'd go to a sporting event because he's a really big sports fan. But then Q-Tip would go to record stores and he'd go through old jazz records, and that's how he would find the hook and the beats. And my kid was like, I don't care about any of that. Please stop. So overplayed my hand. Ranch was really big. Blank 77 is another band that I really love. Back in the day, I remember going to see the Queers, Swingin' Utters. Again, I think there's just so many bands that I just really, really love. It's easier to tell you the ones that I don't like, which I
mm,
won't do.
But
mm.
you played punk rock bowling, right, in Vegas?
We've played Punk Rock Bowling 4 times.
Oh
Oh
wow.
wow.
Yeah.
And how'd you like the Vegas version?
Having been to Iraq, um, the heat was something special. I think so. I'll say this: I absolutely love punk rock bowling. I thought the experience was amazing. It is very hot, obviously, but I think the staff does such a great job mitigating a lot of that. And it's just for me. First of all, it was an honor to ever be asked to do it at all. Our first show at Punk Rock Bowling was a club show with a Global Threat, Cro-Mags,
Wow.
and One Way System.
Oh
So
wow.
if you want to talk about bands that I really love, like a Global Threat is probably in my top 5 punk bands of all time. And I have let them know that. Cro-Mags, One Way System, and then it's like us and like who the fuck are we? So that was our introduction into that. But the bigger thing for me was the fact that the Stern brothers knew who Noise was.
Mm,
Um, I love Youth Brigade. I always have. No matter what else happens, this is something that I can kind of chalk up to a huge accomplishment internally. Every time that we went to punk rock bowling after that, it just got to be more and more fun and more of an experience, and became more of like as we played more and we started to make more friends with bands who also play. It's like a family reunion, honestly.
mm.
You get there and all the bands are staying in the same hotel. So it's like the last time we played was 2023. Roger Murray is having coffee as I'm walking through the airport. And I was like, what's going on, buddy? He's like, Matt, let's go. And getting to, he's one of my heroes, but he's also a friend of mine. And the only time I get to see him is, the Super Bowl of American punk rock, I guess. But like it to me, it's a really, really special event. I've told the Stearns this multiple times. I don't know how they do it logistically. Just the logistics that go into that entire experience is just it's mind boggling to me. But yeah, I love it. I love punk rock bowling.
What is your goal with your band and yourself as a human being?
My goal as a human being, I can tell you, is to. So I drank a lot, and so I've been sober for it'll be 18 months next week, and that's one of the reasons why the Street Level Recovery group kind of speaks to me so much.
Gotcha.
The way that I got sober was kind of on my own, while leveraging assistance from people who I had known been sober for a very, very long time. So sobriety is a very big part of my life, but not just sobriety in itself. It's the manner with which that allows me to be more present as a husband and a father and a friend, frankly. So self-development for me it's a three-pronged initiative. It's personal, it's professional, and then musical. So personal, I see myself continuing to work on being better at the things that matter most, which is being a husband and a dad. Professionally, I'm kind of in a spot where I just love what I do. I'm gone a lot. but we manage it. And then musically, I really want us to record new material, and this is the year that I think that we will do it. The dynamic of the band has changed because I live in North Carolina and everybody else is still in Tacoma. The guys have been, all of us have been writing. I've been sending them songs that I've written. What I'm really excited about with our lineup is everybody is so passionate about the music, and everybody is just like, not that they weren't before, because everybody was very talented, but everybody now is so talented at what it is that they are doing. I'm just really excited to see how these songs come to fruition with everybody putting their own spin on it. Musically, I want to play some places that we've never played. I want to play Italy. I want to play Spain. I want to play South America, put out at least one full length, but I want to put out as many singles as we possibly can. I'll tell you this, the best thing about being in Noise is that, I think a lot of organizations, to include bands and any group of people, they're like, we're a family, and everybody, we just here, we're a family. Noise is a fucking family, without exception. We always have been. We have operated that way. Nate had his kid. I was in the parking lot of the hospital when I had when I didn't. My wife did had our daughter. I was there though. Kenny was the first. Our former drummer, now our guitar player, Kenny, my best friend, was there in the hospital holding her. He's 100% a family, and because we're so busy with work and families, when we go on band trips, that's kind of the only bro time that we really get all together, especially now that I live here. I want to keep creating memories with those guys, right? It sounds overtly sentimental, but I don't really give a shit. Creating memories with my family and my friends, continuing my career by just kind of sustaining kind of where I'm at. Previously, I was in charge of a lot of people, intermittently. And now I'm not. I'm in charge of myself, which is nice because I'm responsible for my performance and how I conduct myself and how I do my job. When we go on stage, I'm just responsible for singing, which is nice. I used to worry about my bass playing and like being very concerned that I'd written a bass line that was too challenging to play and sing at the same time. So I'd go, man, if I could just sing and just that be it, it would be so much easier. Now it's all I do, and I still freak out about whether or not my voice is going to sound good. I think it's just anxiety, but
Yeah.
yeah, I
Fuel.
want
The
us to.
fuel.
Oh, what's that?
It's the fuel.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and then it melts away as soon as you get on stage. It's I mean, better than I do, certainly. New music and create new experiences and play places that we've never played before and experience all that, together as a family. I don't think there's any sort of like definitive like metric that where I would be like, yep, we've done it. Noise sold, 46 records. We did it. Or we played for so many people. To me, that's not really what does it. What does it for me is like we just played. My good friend Mike Reed, he runs a shop out of Titusville, Florida, called Control Tattoo. If you're in Florida, go there. They're amazing. But he has an anniversary party every year. Slapshot's played it a couple of times. Noise played it last year in November. Titusville, Florida. Venue canceled last minute. Mike has it in a chicken and waffles place. So we played in a chicken and waffles place on a stage that his brother built the day before to a packed chicken and waffles place with the staff behind the counter videoing us because they like noise. It was just that right there is to me better than playing for 1,000 people in like a big concert hall. To me, it's just what it's all about.
Yeah.
So if I can just get more experiences like that, that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm not really looking for, oh, we hit it big, or I think that's kind of the antithesis of what punk is about. But I think anybody that band and plays music, I think to say that you have no goals or no expectations, I think it's okay to have a little bit of ambition, right? But I think we've been fortunate enough to where a lot of that validation, I think, at least personally, we've kind of received. So I'm good on that. Now I just want to, make the best music that we can and spend time with my buddies.
Of course, I've never been to war, right? I've never been to war. Do you adjust being there and then coming here? How is your psyche when you leave from there to come here?
It's really odd, man. Like being over there at all, and then coming home. A lot of the ways that you're affected aren't really overt, right? So you don't know that things, and this is not just true of conflict or war. I think it's true with everything. Trauma as a child, trauma as whenever. you're not really cognizant of how much it's affected you until it manifests itself in like a really bizarre way, right? I think there's the last probably 2 generations, society has been a little bit more accepting of understanding that there's trauma associated with that, right? So there are more resources for us than there were for our dads. Having said that, there aren't enough. For me personally, I came home and was like, I'm okay. Like this is this is okay. Oddly enough, it wasn't until my father passed away where really started noticing that like things had changed from the time that I got home over the course. But for me personally, it was kind of a culmination of a lot of stuff that had started happening when I was a kid. Trauma kind of builds on itself, right? Just like cardio, but builds on itself, and then it kind of pops out or manifests itself to where you're not really aware of what it is that you're responding to unless you really pick it apart. So I started getting therapy in 2018, and I will say that the military has done a really good job of trying to combat the stigma associated with behavioral health and getting help. I, both in my professional and personal capacity, I try and leverage all of my experiences to help other people. So I was very open with the fact that I was getting help, very open with the fact that I had quit drinking. More to the point, like to answer your question, it affected me in really odd ways that I didn't really understand until I started picking it apart with the assistance of someone else. And everybody is impacted differently, and everybody's experience is different. I know guys that went through significantly more than I did that seemed fine. I know guys that seemed fine, and then one day they were gone. And it's happened way more times than I care to even go over. But I think if any good comes of that, the illustration that it's fucked up, and just saying, hey, are you okay, you should get help if you need help, like that doesn't do anything for anybody. It has to be a very pragmatically thought out process of getting people connected with the assistance that would actually help them, and then ensuring that that assistance is actually beneficial, right? Not just like, you know checking the block or asking questions and not listening. I was very fortunate in that, the people that helped me were me talking, the ability to talk to somebody with just a completely unbiased opinion of what you've gone through, or who you are. And then when you're trying to explain that, that's when you really start to kind of pick apart how different things have impacted you. The reason that I decided to go and get help for all of that stuff, not just from deployment stuff, but like just life in general, is I have an obligation to be the best version of myself that I possibly can for the people that are eating ramen in the other room. I'm not going to get help to be a better person for your family because you're too proud to admit that like you need it. Like the duality of that is like, I think that's the weakest thing that I've ever done, is to potentially not get help for myself because I
Mm,
wanted to perpetuate this image of being strong and not needing
mm,
it. And I think that transcends like any sort of army, dynamic. I think it's just, that's an inherently flawed part of being a human being, is that, in the process of not wanting to get help and not reaching out, you're actually exposing how weak you really are. And a lot of that weakness is created by society kind of pumping up this, whole like machismo and this,
Isn't that why you're in the punk rock scene? And that's your release right there, the punk rock and the music. And
is very
that's
much
what,
so. I
and
think that's kind of what balanced a lot of it out for such a long time, and maybe why I gravitated towards it in the first place. I was inherently angry. I was just pissed off. And if you were to ask me like, why are you pissed off? I would not have been able to tell you, other than that maybe something my dad did or something happened at school or something. You don't get that angst ridden, and it's kind of cliche that angst ridden youth mad at the world. I think a lot of teens go through that, but I think that's why kind of punk rock came to be what it was and what it is now, is that it's a vehicle for that aggression and an ability to bridge the gap between that aggression and positivity. Whereas instead of your perpetually fighting the things that are causing your anxiety and your anger and your frustration, you're channeling it and kind of processing it and using it to create.
Yeah.
And in the process of creating something, I think you're really working through a lot of shit, and that's definitely what I used it for.
Still going through it myself, because I grew up in a neighborhood that was very violent. And as you hear in some of my songs are talking about guns. Jeff always says, "How comes the songs always talk about guns?" Well, I grew up around guns, and guns was just a part of like putting on a shirt, sing about guns and violence and stuff like that. And I went into therapy myself for like a year and a half because of trauma, experiences, baggage from childhood and everything else like that. I did it for like a year and a half. I think I need to go back again, of course.
I'll tell you this, man.
Sometimes I just flip out, sometimes I just flip out and it's like, yo, dude, you need to chill.
As a photographer, I'm not a musician like you guys, but that's the whole thing. It's about gauging that frequency into the music, into the art. Oh, you're depressed? Why don't you go sing? Or for me, go take photos. You're pissed off? Not necessarily fight. Why don't you go play a guitar riff or write a new song? I don't really know anything about army life, and I have a lot of respect for you, Matt, for doing that. When you get to come home and you get to play, I think that resonates, action based. You don't have to tell people. You have artists like Rancid, Dropkick Murphys, see that vibe in you and where they want to work with you because you're showing that frequency. You're showing that vibe out to the universe. And like a magnet, you're attracting the same kind of artists who have that thought process. I took this
Yeah,
yoga course last year, so that's how I'm thinking now, where whatever you're thinking, it's kind of like what you're drawing in, right? So if you're gonna think you're gonna fight
yeah.
people, those are the dudes that you're gonna hang out with. If you're thinking you want to be an artist, you're gonna get those people in your life.
I think people definitely gravitate toward like-minded people for sure. And I think, art and music specifically, I think especially guys that have been doing it for as long as, bands like Agnostic Front, Slapshot, like all these bands that have been doing this for multiple decades, I think they
Mm.
pick up on, or I like to think that they pick up on, the realness associated with certain music. But I really wanted to address something you said. When you think you're okay, that's kind of when it's the most important to continue to talk to somebody. Like that's kind of the next step. It takes a lot of guts to admit that you need some help and you're not handling things in a manner congruent with the man that you want to be. That takes a lot of balls. Bravery is not the absence of fear, it's the action in spite of it. Scared to get seen doing something that might, someone may perceive as weak. If it means that you're going to have a better relationship with the people who actually matter, gives a shit. I have experienced that, like, I'll be okay. And then lull myself into this false sense of like everything's cool. So like I don't need to talk to anybody because I feel fine. Actually, when it's when you're doing that preventative maintenance on yourself. I feel okay, so I'm not going to go to the gym. I feel healthy, right? Well, no, you have to go so that you can sustain and continue to be in shape. Parallels between like physical and mental health, and one of them is that preventative part. The reason that I've been very vocal about behavioral health. My wife and I discuss this all the time. She doesn't really do social media very much. So like when I'm glued to my phone and making a post, we have a dialogue about it. And, she's my sounding board. She's also much smarter than I am. It's a low bar, but so I will bounce things off her a lot of the time. And when I decided to get sober, I made the decision to do it very vocally. And when I had my wife was like, well, why do you want to do that? And you want to like, what's the reasoning behind it? And I was like, it's there's a portion of it that's for me for accountability, right? Because I got beer in my hand at a show. People were like, weren't you the dude that like 30 minutes ago posted that, sobriety and everything? So there's a little bit of accountability there. But primarily it's every time that I make any sort of social media post about whether it's behavioral health or sobriety, because I think they're very intrinsically linked. Jeff, to your point, like I was using music as a vehicle to get through a lot of stuff, but I was also using alcohol. I was also a paratrooper, and we drink a lot of alcohol, and it is very much glorified. It used to be. So it's like as long as you can perform, nobody cares how much you drink. The reason I do it is because every time I do that, I get a message like, "Hey, how did you do that?" because I'm really struggling, and like how you know, thank you for posting, because it's hard for a lot of people to kind of admit or come to that point. So if I'm doing it openly, maybe somebody that doesn't want to tell anybody that they're struggling knows
Mm,
that I'm kind of a beacon of a person that they can reach out to, because I've already
mm,
admitted that I'm fucked up, right? Like, I'm very open about it. We'll continue to do that, because again, I think leveraging your experiences and what you're going through to help other people. It's something that I try to teach my kids is anytime you have an experience, bad or good, it's only as beneficial as you make it. So if you can use that to teach somebody else or help somebody else, you have an obligation to do that, because that's what makes you a good person. And I've told my kids, like, I don't care if you're CEO of the universe or you have a hot dog stand. I don't care, right? I like the universe, like hot dogs. It's a win-win for me. I just want you to be a happy person, and I want you to be a good person. Like, you check those two blocks, man, I'm good. Did my job as a dad. Um, but I think that's a fundamental element of, and going back to music, that fundamental element of being a good person is what a lot of bands do, is they leverage their notoriety and their position to help other people.
mm.
That show was the Cox Bar 40th anniversary and the Rancid 20th anniversary. And Rancid asked us to play in San
Okay.
Francisco. I was still in Afghanistan, and Lars sent me an email saying you're playing. Um, I will never forget that. That is something
Wow.
that, like, that opportunity was so giant for us. And not, again, not because it's like, oh, we're gonna hit it big now. Like, no, man. Rancid asked you to play in front of Cox Bar, like two of your favorite bands you're gonna play in front of. That is that principle being executed in the musical context. But I think you can do that in every facet of your life, right? But we certainly don't have a problem doing it on fucking social media. You eat at a shitty restaurant, you're going to tell everybody you've ever met in your entire life, and then post about it, right? We don't have
True.
any issue doing that. Do something that can actually help somebody out. I don't even think it's embarrassing, right? To admit that you have a problem with drugs or alcohol, or you struggled with behavioral health. I don't think there's anything embarrassing about that, because everybody in some minutia has an issue with some of that stuff. So
Thanks for coming on, man. You shared your views and your thoughts and your ideas and your experiences with us. You know, it's not every day we get to have like just straight conversation, and it's not all humorous, you know? It's something of value that you can bestow upon everyone else, which is great. You
yeah,
know?
no, this is it was an incredible experience. I genuinely, and I say this as a huge fan. Like, just the fact that this is another one of those things where I'm like, that's pretty cool. But I love the fact that you guys are providing this platform to give people the ability to, and then interjecting your own perspective to give people the ability to kind of share their story. One of the unsung kind of merits of doing it is, like, in listening to somebody share their perspective, there are things that are, you're not maybe cognizant of the fact that it's going to resonate with somebody else, right? But it may, and it may
Mm,
help them get through something, right? Just
true.
like music, right? You're writing a song in my living room on an acoustic guitar, and I'm writing lyrics down just about how I feel, and then somebody from, like, Switzerland is like, hey, this really got me through this one
Yeah, man.
situation. Is just absolutely mind-boggling, but it really serves to illustrate how powerful, like, using a platform is, like, in every conceivable way. So, like, I appreciate the opportunity, but more so I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Bless up.